On January 2nd, 2020, law enforcement fire get dispatched to 4900 43rd Avenue Northeast in Burleigh County. It's actually outside the city limits of Bismarck. The caller is the defendant, Nikki Entzel. She's calling to report that there's possibly a fire at her residence. She says that her husband is at home. Everyone responds, city and county. We have the Bismarck Fire Department, Rural Fire, Bismarck Police Department, Burleigh County Sheriff's Department. The Bismarck Fire Department arrives first, and the first thing they do is they clear the residence, making sure that there's nobody in there, checking to see where the fire's at. And as they're doing that, in the far back bedroom, they find Chad Entzel naked and deceased on the floor. They also see a shotgun on the bed and a propane heater at the foot of the bed. Another crew checks the basement and they find a smoldering fire on top of the furnace downstairs in the basement, which they put out easily. After the house is rendered safe to enter, the sheriff's department comes in because it's their jurisdiction. Deputies start to investigate. They call in a fire marshal to determine origin and cause of the fire. The fire marshal calls in for help with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives for technical assistance as well. The coroner is called. As they're all looking around and looking at the evidence, on the surface, it appears that it may be a suicide. People have committed suicide by shotgun before, and maybe an accidental fire because the propane tank heater was too close to the bed. That's what it appeared on the surface, but as they looked, things weren't adding up. The shotgun was a little too far away from the body. The fact that the propane heater accidentally set fire to a bed in that bedroom was too much of a coincidence when you add to that there was a standalone fire downstairs on the furnace accidentally set as well. Too much of a coincidence. The shotgun had one spent shell in it. So again, on the surface it looked like it was a suicide. But as the coroner came in and examined Chad's body, he found that there looked like 2 wounds in his body, but only 1 shotgun shell in the shotgun. And suicide by shotgun isn't with 2 shots. So deputies started to get statements. One deputy started talking with Ms. Entzel, and he noted in his report that she was fairly calm and didn't appear to be crying. But grief affects everybody differently. Shock affects everybody differently. So he went about his interview. Deputies collected evidence, including Nikki Entzel's cell phone. They also found a cell phone in the residence belonging to Chad Entzel, along with his iPad. An autopsy was requested, and you'll hear from the medical examiner that Chad was indeed shot twice with a shotgun. He had 2 lethal wounds in his body. So deputies did a very thorough investigation in this case. You will hear a lot of evidence. Some of it may seem like it doesn't make sense at the time, but it all comes together because that's what the deputies had to do. Follow the trail of evidence and piece everything together to put a timeline in place to find out what really happened to Chad. In that initial interview with the defendant, deputies found out that she hated the rental home that they were in. She said the furnace wasn't working. That was pretty much the first thing she told them. There was something wrong with the furnace, it wasn't working. She and Chad had argued about that, and she had left. Now keep in mind, January 2nd, 2020 was on a Thursday. She indicated she'd left the home on the Sunday or Monday before, which would have been December 29th or December 30th of 2019. Because she's got medical conditions, the furnace wasn't working, the house was too cold, she couldn't stay there. So she left. Deputies also found out that her children, she's got 2 children from prior relationships that aren't Chad's, they weren't at the home either. They were spending Christmas break with their grandparents in Aberdeen, South Dakota. But she had left to go to a hotel because the house was too cold for her to stay in. She gave her phone to the deputy and allowed the deputy to look through her car or look through her phone, but she asked if she could get another phone from her car so that she could have a phone while this investigation was pending. So with her permission, deputies went through her vehicle that was parked on in the property and looked through it and took pictures and photographs of everything in the vehicle and grabbed a phone from a box that had been mailed that had some phones in it. They took a picture of the label, but they didn't pay much attention to it at the time. There was too much going on. And as they were looking through the pictures later, though, they noticed that the name, the label on the box for those phones, it was mailed to an Earl Howard. That was a name they hadn't heard yet. So they did bring a phone to Ms. Entzel to use. During her interview, she said that Chad abused alcohol to such an extent that he was drinking 2 cases of whiskey a month along with beer on top of that. And that he was always gone, he wasn't doing things with the family, and that he liked to play drinking games. And she described drinking games as where Chad would get intoxicated and then physically abuse her. Deputies, when they were going around the house, noticed that there was a surveillance camera mounted on the house. Ms. Entzel gave them the information as to how to log into that security system so they could check the video and the sensors that were in the house. And when they walked through the house again, they noticed something out of place. Not so out of place that they grabbed it at the time, but they noticed that there was a piece of a Marlboro red cigarette pack on the floor. So, January 3rd, the next day, Friday, January 3rd, the deputies got to work. They started working on the phones. They requested Bureau of Criminal Investigation to come in and assist. Nikki had told them that she was staying at the Staybridge, so someone went to the Staybridge to take a look at key card logins because they use key cards to get in and out of the rooms. And every time your key card is used, there's an artifact for that. There's a record of that. Staybridge has security cameras, so every time you come and go out the entrances, there's a record of that. They went to go get the invoices or the sign-in sheet. When you go to a hotel, you have to register. The registration for the room that Nikki Entzel was staying in was registered to Earl Howard, despite the fact that she had told deputies that she had moved out of the house because the furnace wasn't working, spur of the moment, and she needed to get someplace warm. So they got security feeds from the camera at the home. And they got the administrative logs and the logins to access the system. And they found that sometime on December 30th, Nikki and an unknown male had come to the residence at approximately 7 p.m. And they left at approximately 8:30 p.m. And after that, the camera was set to privacy mode. There was one more corrupted file that they couldn't access for video, but after that, there were no more videos regarding who was coming and going from the house. The login to put that camera system in privacy mode was Nikki Entzel. Officers even went and got cell tower records to see what cell phones were pinging off the cell towers around the home to see if there were consistencies throughout. Ultimately, they conducted numerous interviews. They collected surveillance from multiple businesses. They went through bank records, phone examinations, email accounts, social media accounts, and you're going to hear everything that they did. And as I said, when you hear it, it's going to be a little disjointed because they went places several times. When you hear from the Staybridge Suites individual, you're going to hear about their comings and goings over the course of December 29th through January 2nd. And when you hear from when you hear about the video that was at the house, you're going to hear throughout the day on December 30th, and you're going to hear about sensor readings through January 2nd. And you will have to do what the deputies did and put all of that together to create the timeline as to who was where and what were they doing. But what you will ultimately hear is that Nikki Sue Entzel was having an affair with Earl Howard. She and Earl were going to move to Texas. They were looking for homes in Texas, and she had a job interview scheduled down there within the next couple of weeks after the fire had occurred. She took out a renter's insurance policy for coverage of around $26,000 that was put in effect on December 27th, 2019. She then traveled to Minnesota to meet up with her boyfriend Earl Howard on December 27th or 28th of 2019. He was driving down from Canada. He picked her up in Minnesota, and they drove to Bismarck, where they stayed at the Staybridge Suites. They got in at about 1 o'clock in the morning on December 29th, 2019. While Chad was at his bowling league on Monday, that's when they went to the house between 7 and 8:30 p.m. so that they could collect property of Nikki's and get it out of the house while Chad was gone. As I said, after that, there's no more security video at the house because it was turned into privacy mode. But they took a bunch of Nikki's belongings and the boys' belongings, and they took that back to the hotel. While they were there, between that 7 and 8:30 p.m. time frame, they grabbed the propane heater from the garage and put it in the house. They grabbed a shotgun from the bedroom and they put that somewhere in the house. They got the shells for the shotgun and they loaded the shotgun. And they left at approximately 8:30. They came back to the house on December 31st, 2019 at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. Door sensors tell us that. And they left at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning. The last time anyone saw Chad Entzel alive was leaving bowling on December 30th, 2019 at approximately 10:30 p.m. Between 1 and 3 a.m. on December 31st, 2019, Chad Entzel was shot twice with a shotgun and left dead in the home with a fire started. You'll also hear that before they left the residence after Chad was shot, they staged the room. They staged the bedroom to make it look like Chad killed himself. They took one of the spent shotgun shells out of the shotgun, leaving one behind. You can't commit a suicide shooting yourself twice with a shotgun, so they had to take one of the shells. They put 2 whiskey bottles in the bedroom to make it look like Chad had been drinking. And they arranged the propane heater near the bed, pointed at Chad's body, hoping to start that fire. And they left around 3 a.m. When they wake up December 31st, there's no news of a fire. You know, in Bismarck, that's big news. It's all over the headlines. House fire in Bismarck. There was nothing like that. So at approximately 6:30 in the morning on December 31st, they went back to the house. The house wasn't burned down. So they repositioned the propane heater, and Nikki goes to work and calls Chad in sick to work, buying them some more time. Because of course the next day is New Year's Day, and businesses are closed that day. No one's gonna miss Chad until January 2nd. Door sensors at the home showed that they were at the house at least one more time, trying to start that fire. The house still hadn't caught fire, so again, the fire was started on the furnace. On January 2nd, Nikki goes to work, but she doesn't call Chad in sick that day. His coworkers can't reach him, so during their lunch break, they go to the house. They try calling Nikki too to find out if she's heard from Chad. They're worried. When they go to the house, they see that his pickup is parked in the driveway, but they can't get any answer on the door. They actually called the police to come out and do a welfare check on him because they're worried about him. Remember, they contacted Ms. Entzel and told her, he's not at work, we haven't heard from him, we can't get a response. Her response is, I'm really busy at work today. I'll take a look when I get done with work today. So the officer comes out to the house, he tries to make contact. The layout of the house will be explained to you by officers, but basically you can't see into the upstairs portion of the house. And there was nothing in any of the windows that they could see that caused alarm. And there was no reason for the officers to go in because there was nothing that looked out of place at the house. So after that welfare check, the coworkers went back to work, still worried, still contacting Nikki. And after work, on January 2nd, is when Nikki Entzel goes out to the house and makes her 911 call. On January 3rd, you'll hear that Nikki calls Chad's employer to ask what sort of benefits are available to her as a widow. On January 3rd, she files a claim with that renter's insurance policy that she took out on December 27th. On January 7th, a claim is filed on Chad's life insurance with Allstate. In 2018, you'll find out they got married in 2016, and in 2018, he had taken out a total of $600,000 in life insurance with his wife, Nikki, as a sole beneficiary. So again, you're going to hear and see a lot of evidence regarding dates and times and locations of both Nikki Sue Entzel and Earl Howard, and you will hear about their comings and goings from the staybridge, from the house. You have to listen carefully to get all of that. You'll be able to do what the deputies did, like I said, and piece together the timeline. And once you do, it will show that Nikki Sue Entzel and Earl Howard agreed to kill Chad Entzel, agreed to set the house on fire, to collect the insurance benefits, and to cover up the murder, and agreed to tamper with evidence by destroying or disposing of that second shotgun shell and setting the fire to cover up the evidence of the murder. You will find at the end that Nikki Entzel is guilty. Thank you.
Mr. Glass, would you like to do an opening statement now?
Reserving comment.
All right, thank you. Ms. Lawyer, you may call your first witness when you're ready.
State calls Eric Moe.